Okay, we're looking good. Thank you again for joining me this morning. If you're just coming on, this is QuickBooks Online Tools for Tax Accountants, and I am Valerie Heckman. I'm a senior product consultant with Intuit Small Business Group, working in the accountant segment. I've been with Intuit 6 years. I'm located in Naperville, Illinois, and my role at Intuit is really around educating bookkeeping and accounting firms as they move to the cloud and become what we call a firm of the future. And if you use Twitter, you can follow me at @vheckman, which I mostly tweet about QuickBooks on. So the goals of today's session are to share the key benefits of QuickBooks Online Accountant, to give you some tips and tricks and best practices around navigating QuickBooks Online as an accountant user. I'm hoping you'll get a better understanding of some of the accountant tools for doing cleanup and data review, how to review the audit log and transaction details, and customize, view, and share common financial reports. So I'm going to skip over things like invoicing, bank fees, that kind of stuff today. If we have some time at the end, I'll pull up some other areas if people have questions. But we're really going to focus on tools that you utilize during tax season. To give you a bit of an update on where we are with QuickBooks Online, we have 2.55 million subscribers worldwide. This number is continuing to climb, and I get a lot of questions around, well, what does the base look like of QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online? A little bit hard for us to get a pinpointed number on desktop subscriptions because people can use one version that they purchase, like a 2010 or 2011 version, and kind of keep using it over time. But when it comes to new subscriptions and new people coming in, we find that they're going to online over desktop, and the sort of base of customers for the products are very similar now in size. Where it used to be that desktop was the majority and QBO was a smaller section, that QBO numbers continue to climb. And we anticipate that 78% of small businesses will move online by 2020. I wanted to pull up some cloud benefits of being in QBO in case this is the time of year where you're talking to your clients that aren't using QBO and they're working to decide if QuickBooks Online is a good fit for them. The biggest benefits that we see revolve around access and productivity, reducing some of those IT headaches that folks face on desktop software, and improving data protection. So from an access and productivity perspective, when you're working in the cloud, working on QBO, you're device and operating system agnostic. What that means is it's compatible across multiple platforms. So if your client's using a Mac computer and you're using a PC, it doesn't matter. When you're signing in, you have that same experience. Likewise, if they're using any of Apple's phones or iPads or anything like that, using an Android tablet or phone, same type of experience. You're going to be able to click into that QuickBooks Online app and utilize a lot of different pieces of functionality on the go, which basically opens you up to have anytime, anywhere access. As long as you have an internet or cellular connection, everybody who has a user ID and password to the account can sign in and get to work. With that, there's a reduction of IT headaches as well because you're no longer having to worry about getting the data file from another person to open it up and work in the account. You don't have any of the complicated network or hosting type requirements if you're trying to have multiple users in there at the same time or anything like that. No installation required, so you're not having to update your computer and update the version or buy a new version to be in the latest and greatest functionality. No installation required. So anytime we roll out new updates, they'll be in the account, and there's not any versions to worry about. I talk to a lot of accountants that, especially this time of year, they're bogged down by figuring out, okay, this client's on 2013 and this client's on 2015, and we've got to do this to get their file from them. Those types of headaches go away. And there's minimal system resource required going forward because you don't have to worry about backing up that file yourself or making sure that the client gets those journal entries into the file that they're working on. All of that's run through the cloud, so when you're actually in a client's file making changes, they can be assigned in there at the same time as you and see those right away. So the collaboration really improves. From a data protection standpoint, I'm not going to talk about this too extensively, but we are held to the same data standards as leading banks, right? So we've got that encryption technology. We've got redundancies and securities and automatically, taking care of that data so that you don't have to worry about housing that locally or having any sort of, complicated backup system. We've got some great white papers. If you go to the QuickBooks website and click around in the accountant area, there's a security page. You can also go to security.intuit.com if you're looking for information around our security and privacy and all that great stuff. And just as a bit of a housekeeping piece here, there is a question box in GoToWebinar. So if you have any questions as we're going through, I'm the only one here, so I don't have somebody helping me answer questions, but I'm happy to address those. I'll stop and look for those as we're going along and address as many as we have time for. So I'm going to jump into QuickBooks Online Accountant now, and we'll go through these topics. So if you're not aware, QuickBooks Online Accountant is our portal for accessing your clients that are on QuickBooks Online, but it's also more than that. It's really an area that we've been designing to be a place where accountants can do all of their work all in one place. So not only are you able to manage your QBO clients in there, you can also add clients that are on QuickBooks. For QuickBooks Online clients, of course, we surface some information around what's going on in their account, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. But you can also manage your team and some of the work that needs to be performed, and I'll show you what those tools look like. When we go into QuickBooks Online as an accountant user, I'll walk through our navigation, and I'll focus in on a few of the accountant tools that you will find in a toolbox when you're signed in as that type of user. We'll also review the audit log and search functionality so that you can better trace what activities have happened in the account, and then we'll kind of dive into reports, how to view reports side by side, customizing and saving your custom reports and where to access those, and how to export to Excel and PDF. And then finally, we'll leave off with one of the accountant tools, the trial balance, and how that can integrate with our ProConnect Tax Online product. Although I'm just going to talk about that at a high level to give you a sense of what's there, not dive into the online tax product today. Okay, so you should be seeing my QuickBooks Online Accountant account. And actually, before I get any farther than this, can you just type in the question box if you are already using QuickBooks Online Accountant or if it's something that you haven't seen? I just kind of want to get a sense of what people are doing. But I'm not going to beginner on you. Okay. Already using it, already using it, already using it. Okay. Gotcha. So some of you might already be very familiar. So I'm going to try and sort of run through a couple things maybe you have or haven't noticed. So I apologize if this is very reviewed for some of you. But when we get into the QBO client, or QBO client rather, I'll try and share some real tips and tricks for those who are pretty comfortable in here already. Okay, so when I sign in, for those of you who maybe haven't seen this, I am signed into my firm's account, Socrates Accounting. I'm Valerie, and I have 50 clients that I have access to. So I'm kind of the owner of our whole firm's account, and I would decide which team users I set up and give access to which clients. So that when they sign in, if I invited in my team member, Mary, she would see Mary's clients with a list of, 5, 10, however many she needs to work on. On this homepage, we surface a lot of information around what's going on in that client's file so that you can get a sense of QuickBooks Online activity without even going into their books. So we can see if their books are closed or not, and we see the closing date. I can hover over the QB and see which level of service they're using for QuickBooks Online. So we have Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus. You can also manage any clients that you have using our self-employed product through here. And you'll see who last signed in and when. From a bookkeeping perspective, you'll get a sense of anything that might need attention, so changes to reconciliations, changes to closed books, unaccepted transactions that have come through online banking that haven't been either matched against what's already in the register or added straight from the bank feed. We'll also see the last time the banking downloaded any new information. And then from a payroll perspective, if you have any clients who are using the online payroll products, you'll see the next pay date last pay date if I hover over that, QB, and any taxes and forms that they have due or overdue. And hopefully none of your clients look like this time of year. When I click on the name of a client, it doesn't bring me into their books yet. If I'm just wanting to sign in and jump right to somebody's books, I can click that green QB, or I can choose them from the drop-down up top. But if I'm not ready to do that, I can click on their name, and it brings me into an expanded view of the client. So along the top, I'll see the client's business name. I can hover over and see which other employees at my firm have access to this client. And I'll show you where we manage the team in just a moment here. Any contact information that I've entered in for the client will show here as well. And I can click Edit if I need to make any changes or expand out those details. From the Edit, I can also give additional team members that I've set up access. So we'll go through the setup in a moment, but I did want to point out that if I scroll down to the bottom, I can show all team members and even start typing somebody's name to give them access as well. So I've got a big long list of team members, and I can pick and choose and add and remove access. Now, because I am the firm master admin, I will automatically have access to this, to all the clients that we're managing here. The first page, the first tab here is for notes. So this is an area where you can leave internal only notes, so internal to your firm. So only the other employees that have access to this client will see anything that's written here. It's not shared with the client. So it's a place where you can, put in tidbits that might be important reminders when working on this client, kind of similar to putting a Post-it on a file folder or something like that. If I go into the bookkeeping tab, we'll see some of that same information from the home page. So if the books are closed or not, last sign-in, last download. What I love here is that we'll also see the account watch list. And this will show the current balances in QuickBooks to these bank accounts, as well as when they were last reconciled. We'll also have shortcuts to those areas that need review, like the unaccepted transactions to the bank or changes to reconcile in the case of this client. Trial balance, this is where we can start an actual tax review, and we'll go through that as well in a bit. Shared documents is an area where I can upload documents that would be shared between the accountant users that access this client, as well as the client themselves. And we have a spot within QuickBooks Online Accountant where you can request documents from clients if you'd like, and they will be housed here, or I can just upload something that I already have saved on my machine and download things from here as well. Those of you that may have been using QuickBooks Online Accountant for a long time might remember when we used to have a document storage system through Box. This is different than that, and we haven't had that for quite a while. There's not a storage limit here, so you're not going to get cut off if you have like more than 5 or 10 gigs of stuff saved. And it's not going through a third party. This is all into it here. And then last is this tax tab. And if you've got a client that you're using ProConnect Tax Online for, that's Intuit's professional tax product in the cloud. It runs on the same engine as Lacert, if some of you are familiar with that. We can actually pop into those tax returns from here and see their status and e-file status. I'm in a test account, so we haven't electronically filed anything here, but I'll get that visibility and I'll have the shortcuts to view the return. All right, let's come back to the main page. Wanted to touch on the team users. So within QuickBooks Online Accountant, we can set up as many team users as the firm as you need and give them permission to work on clients, as well as specify some things from their firm admin kind perspective, like what are they able to do and not do at the firm level. So I can add a new user. I'm just going to edit an existing user for the sake of time. So when I am initially setting up Libby, I would put in her first name and last name and the email address. There's an option here to put in a title if you want to specify. I know some firms will use that to identify like what team their employee is on. And then once I set this up and send it to Libby, she'll get an invitation through her email to accept becoming part of Socrates accounting so that she can sign in and see whatever clients I've given her permission to work on. The next step of setting her up is deciding what she's able to do from a firm admin and books perspective. So is she able to edit the firm information? Can she set up other firm users, other people on the team? What can she do in terms of subscriptions and billing? If you hover over these, it gives a description of what each of the settings will allow. Your firm books is a copy of QuickBooks Online that we give to your firm to use for your own bookkeeping. So I can decide what the staff member is able to do in there from a kind of AR and AP standpoint. You can hover over and it'll show what they're able to do there as well. And then managing clients is a yes or no question if we're able to add, edit, and delete clients out. It's kind of related to subscriptions and billing, but maybe a bit different, right? So being able to actually view the company subscriptions, the billing information, and history. If you've got wholesale billing, that comes into play, and we'll touch on that in a moment. And then the client access is important because I can decide which clients Libby's going to work on. When you grant users access in this way, they're considered an admin type user in the QBO file, meaning these people, whoever you give access to, when they go into that client, they're going to see everything that the client sees as well as the additional accountant tools. And I can start, searching for a client if I have a big long list. If I check this top box, it would give Libby access to all of the clients. And this is really flexible. So if Libby is only working in clients during tax season, I can come in and check and uncheck as necessary to add and remove access. And then if she were to leave the practice or, have a role change or something, I can come in and mark her completely inactive if I needed to, and that'll remove all the client access as well as her access to this QuickBooks Online accountant account. So gone are the days of having to kind of chase around and tell people to change passwords or, make sure that the file isn't on this person's machine if they're taking files with them or whatever. It's just very easy to change those permissions without having to chase after things to keep the data secure. All right, I'm not seeing any questions so far, so hopefully I'm going at a good pace. Let me know if you've got any concerns as we're going along. All right, I'm going to jump into a QuickBooks Online client. We'll come back and look at some of the other areas of here. Oh, you know what? I told you I'd show you work, so let's look at work first. Then I'll bounce back in here if there's other QBOA questions at the end. Okay, so the Work tab is the spot in QuickBooks Online Accountant where the firm can manage work that needs to be done for clients and assign that to team members and kind of keep track of what needs to be done today, this week, next week, the next 30 days, and even beyond that. And we'll get into that in a second here too. So when I come into this tool, I can create projects, give the project a name, indicate what client it's for, set a due date, decide if this is a project that's going to repeat, and then assign it to somebody. So maybe I'm going to keep this really simple here, preparing financial statements. You can pick the client that's going to be applicable for, and I can start typing their name too if I have a big long list. Give that a due date, end of the month. Maybe we want to set this to repeat so that it automatically gets added to the list here and kind of set it and forget it. So maybe we do that on a quarterly basis, and then I can choose, what day or a specific date. So we'll say, maybe it's the, first Friday. You guys would know better than I what the timing would be for this to have it be ideal. So I can kind of tweak this and make the dates make sense. I can decide if this is going to have an end date. So maybe I set that to match up with the engagement, or maybe I set it to never so that it repeats ongoing until we turn it off. And then I can assign that to a team member that accesses that client. So this will match up with the list that we saw within a profile. So if I switch it to a different client, I know this one's got a lot of team members. We'd see the team members that have access to this client. We'll move it back to the other one. And then I'd fill out the details if I'd like. And within the project, I can also add individual tasks. So maybe I want to really fine-tune every step of preparing the financial statements. And you all know better than I would every single step that would involve. But, you know, if you wanted to have individual steps for each report that you need to run and putting together the management reports, this doesn't necessarily have to be work that's related to QuickBooks Online. I know most firms, when they're setting this up, that's top of mind, and we're in QuickBooks Online Accountant. But we are seeing firms that if they don't have a practice management solution, utilizing this free workflow tool can be really helpful to kind of set up everything that needs to be done for each of the team members. And then once I add that project, I'm not going to save that one, it gets added to this grid, and I can monitor, you know, work for individual clients, for different team members, different types, so I can look at those projects as a whole or the individual tasks within them. We'll get into requests here. And then I also can look at this in a list format, and I prefer the list. So you can toggle between the list or the grid. I prefer the list. This is kind of how my brain works. I can narrow it again down to specific clients, team users, the types of requests. In here I can also go by status and date. So if I wanted to see what was to do or in progress only, and maybe I want to narrow it to what's due this week, we can look at those. Forgot to mention, when you are setting up a project, let me open one up, I can edit the series. So if I need to make changes, maybe that repeat didn't quite work out and we need to adjust it, I can do so. I can also duplicate a project. So if I want to make a copy and maybe configure this a little bit for a different client, I can go through and make those changes and then save it, and it'll show up with the same kind of details for the other client here. And I can sort this as well. If I wanted to sort it by status or due date or what have you across the top, I can. Then the last piece of this tool I wanted to show you is that option to create client requests, because I think this can be really helpful. You can put together a request, send it to your client, and then they get a link to upload the document, or they can answer the question to the email going within QuickBooks. So they'll see the request, mostly for documents, within QuickBooks Online. So if I needed a bank statement, for December from this client, and give that a due date for them. So maybe I'd really like it by Wednesday of next week. I can type up the details of what I need from the client. If I have a document that I'd like to send to them, I can include it in this request. So maybe bank statement's not a good example, but if you have a form that you need them to fill out, or something that perhaps needs a signature or what have you, I can send that along as an attachment with this request. I'll publish it to their QuickBooks, and then I have the option to notify them. So this you can check on and off depending on if you'd like to send an email. We had some folks say that they don't want to send email notifications to their clients. They'd rather just have it posted in QuickBooks, so we made that optional. But if you do notify the client, you get this preview of what that email will look like, and you can customize that to your liking. I can decide if I'm going to send it from my firm name or send it from myself as an individual. I can decide if I want to allow replies or just have it come from this no reply Intuit email address. It'll still come from that, but you'll notice the reply to fills in my information. Client's email will show here. I can add additional email addresses if I need to send it to more than one person. This is going to pull the email address from their profile in QBOA. So when we saw that edit client window before, that's where that email address is coming from. And then I fill out my subject, and I can type a message here. Hi, can you send me blah, 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 right? So we'll see a preview of what that email will look like for your client. So they'll have a button to respond in QuickBooks. They'll click on that, securely sign into their account, and they can upload the document from there. And you'll both have spots that you can see that. If I don't send an email, somebody's asking a question, if I don't send an email, where will clients see the request on their dashboard? Yes and no. So when they are in their account, they have a spot on the sidebar called My Accountant. They click into My Accountant, it'll show any open requests from their accountant. So your information would show along the top, and then they'd see any requests that you sent. I'll show that when we jump into a client here in a moment. Great question. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to go into a client file. I can click that green QB, or I can choose the drop-down to jump into a client, start typing their name. And one of the advantages of being in as an account user, for those that haven't utilized this, is you can toggle between your clients very easily. That's another way that those IT headaches go away, right? Because you're just in one account, not worrying about opening up different years of QuickBooks to pull open a client's file and work in it. You can just toggle between the people that you need to interact with. So now I'm in my client file as an accountant user. If I click on that green QB accountant, it'll pop me back to the home dashboard where I can see my full client list and work in those tools. And I'm going to talk to some of the navigation pieces. And I know a number of you are already using QuickBooks Online, so this might totally be review. But I find it helpful, especially if you've just recently started working with QBO clients and you've been working on desktop before. It is very different, and the navigation is very different, and there's a reason for that. When we've designed QuickBooks Online, we've really had our mobile users in mind in a lot of ways. So we know that most folks are going to access their accounting system from a laptop or desktop computer, but we all know those clients that tend to do pretty much everything that they can on their tablets or on their iPhones. And I suspect that we're going to see that more and more going into the future. And so the design elements of QuickBooks Online are very similar to a mobile device so that it's easy to pick up and work in QBO on any of those devices. So the left-hand navigation, similar to when we're on a phone, doesn't have to be a QuickBooks app, pretty much any app. If you click the hamburger button, it expands and collapses those menus that you can go into. In the upper right-hand corner, we'll see the plus. This is our Quick Create, where you can go to add transactions and activities to QuickBooks. And I think about being on my tablet, and I click the plus button, and I see the options of different things that I can add to the account. So creating transactions in this case. A few other things here, the accountant toolbox, and we're going to jump into a number of these tools today, most of them. This is where the functionality that's either exclusive to accountants or that we feel you're going to access most frequently all live. And then coming back to the corners, we looked at the plus for Quick Create. Next to the plus is the gear. This is where your settings and tools and lists live. And I recommend coming into accountant settings when you're working with a client. It's similar to the preferences in QuickBooks Desktop, if that's what you're using today. You can configure their account to fit the needs of the business. Turn things on and off and set up different settings. I'm not going to go through all of these by any means, but I'm going to bounce down to advanced because I get this question a lot this time of year. So we saw on our dashboard in QBOA the closing date. Where does that closing date come from? That's coming from the option here to close the books. So if I check that off, I can set a closing date and then decide if I want to allow users to make changes after a warning or a warning and a password. So only admin users can set up that password here. And then there's other things that live in here that you might run into at tax time as well. Enabling account numbers. Maybe you've got a newer client and nobody's ever set up account numbers for them. You can check that box on. There's a subsetting for showing account numbers. So if the client really doesn't like the idea of seeing that when they go to make transactions, they can come into the settings and uncheck that to themselves, but you can have that checked off so that you see account numbers when you go to create a journal entry or write a check or whatever you're doing. And then things like class and location tracking, some different types of automation, our new project tracking functionality, all of that kind of stuff lives here as well. And then, of course, we can pop into the list if we want to look at any of the different list elements of QuickBooks Online more closely. So like jumping into the chart of accounts, pretty common this time of year. If you need to, say, assign those account numbers, there's a pencil icon here to do a batch edit to clean up the chart of accounts. So maybe you need to number those or make changes to the name. Just like QuickBooks Desktop, if I name two accounts the same thing, so long as the type and detail type match, QuickBooks will ask you if you want to merge those accounts together. And then another couple of navigation elements. If you have questions, if you click on the question box, you can search through articles. There's also going to be the option to start a chat with us, our Pro Advisor support, or give us a call. So something you might not know if you don't work in QBO very often, accountant users are considered Pro Advisors to us across the board. You can become a certified QuickBooks Pro Advisor. That's a free program online. You'll notice when we're back in QBOA, there's a Pro Advisor tab where you can go to actually go through the certification. So there's the training videos and guides there, the place to take the test, all of that stuff is located there. It's a great resource tab, even if you don't want to go through the process of becoming certified. Just looking at those guides or watching those videos on certain topics can be really helpful because they're written by practitioners. But if you are certified and or you've got a lot of clients on QBO, it kind of bumps you up in our support levels. So you'll see the level you're on here. Diamond is the top tier, and you can start a chat with our agents or give a call. There's also an accountant help hub that has lots of articles and resources, as well as links to learning about new product features. And then the search. I love the search, especially for accountant users, especially this time of year. So when I click into the search, I can look for transactions. You know, I can start typing a check number, or if I put a dollar sign or a decimal in a number, it'll look for that amount. That's a tip. Make sure if you're looking for a dollar amount, you put a decimal or a dollar sign. But what I also can look for is reports, and I can jump into my reports very quickly from here. So if I start typing the name of a report, it's going to pull up any custom reports that match that description, as well as any of the canned and ready-to-go reports in QuickBooks Online that fit that title. So I can kind of look through. If I type R and a colon, oops, it'll pull up all of the reports here as well. Let me do that again. So all my custom reports, I've got a lot of them, and then the individual reports in QuickBooks. So you can use this as kind of a search tool. I can do the same for accounts. So if I was looking for to jump into a bank account, if I start typing the name of it, it'll pop open there as well. And we'll go through some navigation of reports towards the end here. Okay, so let's jump back to that accountant toolbox and look at some of these tools that we have. The first one I'd like to show is the reports tool. This allows you to set a default date range for any reports that you run, as well as a default basis, so accrual or cash. And that's going to be independent of how the account as a whole is set up. So if it's a accrual-based client and you have them set up that way in the settings, this is just going to change how the reports default. So you could run cash basis reports on an accrual client, for example. The default date range is going to impact the reports and any of these cleanup tools in the accountant toolbox. So this time of year, maybe all of the reports I'm running are for last year. This will save me from having to change those reporting periods and click through each time. There are a few reports that, you know, it only makes sense to have like the monthly data or something. So some of them will still default that way, but your common financial type reports will choose these defaults. Somebody asked, does this change the default for the client also? It does not. So this is an accountant specific thing. So it's only going to change it for you as the user signed in. So the default is typically this year to date when the client's running their report. And I might change it back to this year to date when I'm done with last year's books, right? So that I don't get confused when I'm coming in here come April or something. The next tool is reclassify transactions, and I'm going to kind of bounce around this list. Reclassify transactions is where I can do some batch cleanup on certain types of transactions. So I can use this as a review tool to look at my profit and loss accounts and balance sheet accounts and see the transactions that are sitting in each of them. But then if I have a client that has been forgetting to assign a class, or maybe they've never used classes and we're setting them up for the first time, I can assign those in batch in here. What I can also do in batch is make changes to the account that was utilized for certain types of transactions. And I'm going to talk about which ones you can't do that for. I've got a bit of a list. So let's look at an example. So maybe I have a client that's putting everything in uncategorized expense for whatever reason. I can go in and look and see the transactions that are sitting there and actually assign those to the right accounts, right? So if we see something like Best Buy, maybe that's supposed to be an office expense. So I can start typing the name of their account and reclassify that from here. I can also click on that transaction if I need to open it and see some more details. And then I can review other areas. So maybe they've got a lot of travel meals and, you know, we just want to make sure that there's nothing else sitting in here that doesn't look like a travel meal. Or maybe they're supposed to put all the travel meals to another class and they haven't done it for some of these. I can, you know, check off the boxes here to select those and make an assignment of the class. So you'll see a green dot here if a transaction is able to be changed for both the class or the account, so both of those reclassified. Item-based transactions, you can only change the class on because there's multiple accounts involved, right? You might have a COGS account and a sales of product income account and whatever else, kind of dividing this up. Some transactions cannot be reclassified, so the item-based transactions are the key one. You'll also see kind of like a red dot if it's a sales tax transaction or an inventory adjustment. If I were to look in like a billable expense or discounts given, those are going to show up with red because, you know, inventory adjustments are always going to affect inventory shrinkage and inventory assets. Billable expenses are not, you know, changed from here because you're going to have already chosen your default billable expense income account in the company setting. So keep that in mind. But for things like expenses, this is really great to just be able to make sure, let's make sure there's nothing in the cost of labor expenses that isn't actually cost of labor, and let's make sure that classes have been assigned correctly. Void and deleted transactions brings us into the audit log with the filter turned on to see what's been voided or deleted out. And I can view the history of those transactions from here as well. I'm going to pop into the full audit log. So this is a filtered version, so it saves you a bit of time looking at those. If I go into the gear and into the audit log as a whole without any filters turned on, you'll see that QuickBooks Online keeps track of everything that's happened in the account. So every edit, every login, when people memorize reports, all of those things will show up here. And I can filter down by user or different types of activities. So I can choose users, date ranges, different events. When the client goes into the audit log, they will see the name of your firm. They don't see the individual team users that you set up. So we saw that for this client, I've given David and maybe Libby and Alice access to work in this client. They're not going to see David or Libby or Alice's name. They're going to see Socrates Accounting. Now, if you've got client users in here, everyone will see their name and what's going on, but we kind of mask the firm users from the client. When I click on View History, so these are those transactions we just changed in the Reclassify tool, we're going to see that, the other piece of that is the firm will actually see the team user. So it's only hidden to the client, in case that was unclear. So when I go to view the history of a transaction, I can click the carrots to expand, and it'll highlight what was changed. I can also click this compare button to view these side by side, and even narrow it further to only show changes. So we know this one didn't have a class, and we just assigned the other class, that's what the class was named, to this transaction. I can always trace back kind of what happened. Of course, something like class might not be a big deal, but if dollar amounts have changed or vendor names have changed, those types of high impact things, we can see that over time. If I click into this expense, I could make any edits. Maybe we need to change it back or change it to something else, whatever the case may be. Maybe we're missing a payee and we want to put that in here. Whenever I'm in a saved transaction, so whether I got to this from the register or from a report or from opening the recent transactions, however I got to something that's been saved, you'll see an option down in the middle for more. And this is where you can go to get to that audit history for a particular transaction. So you don't always have to search in the audit log and filter down that way. You can shortcut yourself into the audit history. Another quick thing that lives under this More menu is the transaction journal. So if I wanted to see the debits and credits happening in the background for this transaction, I can click on that journal and it will run a quick report to show you what's going on there. So the expense is hitting these two accounts. You guys know how journal entries work. I can see this. I can print it off. Maybe we need to open up another window to look at something else side by side with this to do some corrections. We're going to talk about having multiple windows side by side when we get into the reporting, but that could be applicable here too. Somebody asked, how long is the audit log available? Great question. The audit log is always on. It can't be turned off, and it's going to keep track of everything that happens from the inception of the account to the present. Great question. All right, next on our list here. Oh, I'm seeing if there's any other questions coming through. Next on our list is reports. So, wait, I'm sorry, journal entries. Let's talk about journal entries, then we'll get into reports. So we just looked at the journal on a transaction. Let's say we need to go in and make a journal entry. So client users and accountants can both make journal entries. You've got a shortcut in your accountant toolbox. They will find that under the plus on the other end. The difference being that when you go into journal entries, you actually have a box to mark a journal entry as adjusting. The clients aren't going to see this box here. When I mark it as adjusting, it's going to show up on an adjusting journal entry report. So I can run a report on that. Couple things to kind of note on journal entries. In QBO, you can do multiple AR and AP lines in a single journal entry. If I want to open recent journal entries that I've created, I can click on the hourglass in the corner here and jump into the last one I made or something previous. If I go into view more, I'll see all the journal entries that are recent, so I'll go back even further. This can be helpful, and it doesn't just show up on journal entries. You'll see that same hourglass if you're in a check or an invoice or sales receipt, wherever. So if I'm opening up a saved journal entry, so we'll open up one that's saved. Of course, I'm going to then see that more menu appear where I can go into the audit history, copy this, delete it if I needed to. Transaction journal is a little redundant in a journal entry, but that is where you'd go if you want to print a journal entry or you want to export it to Excel for whatever reason. That's a spot that you can do that as a way of taking it out of QuickBooks. And then the reverse option shows up here if you're in a saved one as well. Journal entries and most types of transactions in QBO have an option to make them recurring. So this can be a helpful way to automate. You can schedule a transaction to happen automatically or to give you a reminder on your home dashboard. Or unscheduled would be if I want to save a template. So maybe I've got a really long multi-line journal entry that I'm putting together and I know I'm going to use that again at some point. If I click unscheduled, that's going to save a template of that journal entry that I can then access later through the recurring transactions menu under the gear. I'll show you where that lives in a second. So I can set this to be recurring in one of these different formats, or maybe I don't need to. I can save this, save and close it, save and new as well. And this is where the recurring transactions live. They're under the gear. So this can be a way you might only be working with them with tax stuff, but this can be a way to really help your clients automate things in their books as well accurately. So I can have recurring bills, recurring checks, invoices, a lot of different things. I can review my reminder list from here, or I'd see if I had an unscheduled template, and I can just open that template from here and use it. I can narrow this down by transaction type. So these are all the different things you can set as recurring. Okay, we talked about the audit log and search, so let's jump into reports. So we know reports tools where we can set the default for the reports we're running, and then we have shortcuts to get into accountant reports, management reports, and my custom reports from here. If I go into the report menu here, I'll see those options along the top as well. So your accountant reports, only a couple of these are really accountant only. So it's kind of like the toolbox where we wanted to put everything that we think you'll be most likely to run in one spot for you. But there are a couple accountant only, your trial balance and adjusted trial balance and adjusting journal entries. If I run a report, we're going to see the most common customizations for that report along the top of it. Unless you have it sanded down like maybe I do here. I zoomed in too much or something. Let me go back. Oh, I ran an account list. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention where I was clicking. I'm trying to run a balance sheet. There we go. Okay, so the account list doesn't have these along the top, but any other report you're in will show the most common customizations up here. And then, of course, we're saving ourselves some clicks if we set the default for the date range. And then how you're displaying your report. In the case of a summary type report, like a balance sheet or a profit and loss, we can set some comparisons to other periods. So add a column for previous year, dollar amount, or percent change, run the report. I'm in a test account, so these are probably pretty dramatic numbers. But anytime you kind of set anything here, you click Run Report, and it'll reflect below. If I click on the Customize button, I'll see the full range of customizations for this report, so not just the most common ones. Summary reports are less customizable than like a detail report. So if you see a report with detail in the name, you tend to be able to do a bit more in terms of the formatting and such, especially if you're in like a transaction detail report where you want to add extra columns and that kind of thing. But, maybe I need to change the format of my negative numbers, have those show in red. Maybe I do want to make some changes to how the report is titled and what I'm going to include on the header and footer. And then I run that report to reflect my selections. A note of advice for navigating a single report, I run into this question a lot. If you drill down, so say we want to drill down and look at this bill savings account. Now I'm looking at a transaction report. And sometimes when you're in a transaction report, this only has one, so maybe it's not the best example, but you want some more information along the top. If you click on this small gear here, you can check off to have some other columns display. So without having to go into the Customize button, you can kind of quickly turn on, say, debit and credit, that kind of thing, and have those columns added. Now, if I go into the full Customize and rows and columns, I can change the columns and sort of reorder them. So maybe I want the debit and credit to be closer up. Maybe I don't want to see the memo. I don't know. And I can run the report to reflect that. Now, I will have to do that for each individual line, but it is something that I can do. The other thing to know with that, so if you drill down into a report and then you want to go back to the main report and not have to reset everything, instead of using your back arrow, use your back to report summary, because that's just going to take you back one page. And those customizations that we made, I made my numbers red and in parentheses here, those will stay in place as I'm navigating through. So get in the habit of drill down and then back to report summary. Now, if I want to lock my customization in place so that if I'm coming into this client's account later, I have that and I don't have to go through the customization again, I save that customization. And I can give it a name. The name does not have to be the same as what you've named the report. So if you want to use your initials to make it easier to jump to it, or some other defining characteristic, I can give that a name. And then we've got options here to add it to a group. So maybe I'm building out a group of management reports so that I have a shortcut in that My Customer Reports area to go in and just run the reports I need and nothing else. Maybe you're helping put together a group for your clients or sales performance and weekly and so on here. And then I can decide if I'm going to share the report with all users or just my firm. So just those firm users that access this particular client. So that can be really helpful for your financial type reports, right? You don't necessarily want the client going in and running those themselves. So I can make those distinctions here. Now, I talked about viewing two reports next to each other and what that looks like in QBO. It can be done. The easiest way is to duplicate whatever tab you're on and then navigate yourself to that other page in another window. And I know that sounds kind of complicated, so let me show you what it looks like. So I would right-click on my tab, duplicate tab, and this will show up in both Chrome and Firefox. I think Internet Explorer has a way of doing it as well. We also give you a shortcut in the Accountant Toolbox to open a new window. So if you are using a different browser and you don't see a duplicate, there's an option there. Accountant users tend to prefer Chrome or Firefox with QuickBooks Online. So now I've got my balance sheet open here, and then I can navigate in the second window to the other report. And I like using my shortcut here to jump into one that I've maybe saved already or one of the canned and ready to go. So now I've got a profit and loss comparison open and my balance sheet open, and I can hold down that tab and drag it to another window. So if I'm working on multiple monitors, you can drag those about. If I'm working on one computer, I might choose to, I'm on a Windows machine, so I can use my window key and the arrow on my keypad to kind of pop one of these to one side and then do the opposite arrow on the other side, and then maybe collapse my left hand panels to give myself a bit more space to look at this. So that's a way you can view two things next to each other on one monitor. But I know a lot of accountants' desks look like a space station, so you might have multiple monitors. You might open multiple reports. Something that we've recently updated is if I have a report open and then in the other window I make a journal entry or I create a check or something like that, in the past you'd have to refresh the screen to get those changes to show. Now for accountants it's going to auto refresh to reflect those changes, so it saves you a couple clicks there as well as you're working. So that's two windows side by side. And again, it doesn't have to be reports. I could have the register open on one screen, the bank feed on the other, or something like that. Works great, especially if you've got two monitors going, but even on a laptop, you can usually look at a couple things next to each other really well. And then the last thing I wanted to point out here, and we'll spend a few minutes on the trial balance and ProConnect tax, is exporting out your customizations. So on an individual report, I have my options along the top here to email it, print. When I go to print, I can choose if I'd like it to print in portrait or landscape, and then export to Excel or to a PDF. Now, if you've got a very large report, exporting it to Excel will give you, more lines at once than going into a PDF or printing. So you might run into big reports. You need to run like a certain time period. So if I'm trying to run the entire ledger for the whole year, I might want to break that up so that it fits those sort of size limitations to taking it into Excel. Because if it's really huge, you might need to do it like by quarters or something like that. Same goes for when it loads up. So if you've got a really long report, we try and load the first 200 lines, and then when you scroll down to the bottom, it'll give like a little link to load more transactions so that it's not getting bogged down trying to open everything all at once. And then I can always go to my custom reports list to see any of those saved reports that I have. Now I've got a big long list here, but I've got individual reports that I've saved. I've also got those groups I talked about. So you can look at groups that you've put together, expand and collapse those. I can schedule from here individually sending out reports, so one at a time or as a group. So maybe I put together some sales performance reports for my client, and then I want to schedule to send these out automatically. On a monthly basis or weekly, I can type up the email, put in the email address. I've seen clients utilize this if they've got like a board of directors or those types of people that they want to send things out to on an interval automatically. You can set that up in here too. Or I can just come into this list to run the report from here. And again, I've got a big long list. And then finally, the trial balance. And I noticed Karen did ask a question. I'm going to try and get to that. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. Okay, so please repeat how you use search to find reports quickly. So if I click the box once and wait for a second, it'll load the recent transactions. And then once that's loaded, I type the name of the report, or I mentioned typing R and a colon. That pulls up the full report list. And then I can click into the report from there and it'll open it. And likewise, if I do A and a colon, I'll see accounts, and I can open up those bank registers if I wanted to. I hope that helps. And then automatic saving of a file is considered a benefit of QBO. What happens if your client wants to switch software and needs a copy for backup and conversion? Okay, that's a great question. So today there's not an option for like taking the QuickBooks Online file into a totally different software package, but there is an option to export it out to QuickBooks Desktop. So if somebody, I hope this doesn't happen, but if somebody needed to go back to desktop, or maybe they've gotten very, very big and QBO is not a great fit and they need to go to Enterprise QuickBooks, exporting data will guide you through the steps. And we do have you go into Internet Explorer to do this. And so that's something to keep in mind there too. Great question. A little off topic, but that's okay. I hope that answered it for you. All right, let's close out with the trial balance for just a moment. So that's in the accountant toolbox here as well. And this is the spot where you can go to work in a working trial balance and do some cleanup work to prep the account for the tax return. So when I first come into this tool, I'm choosing the tax year that I'm working on, and we guide you through making that selection, indicating the tax form that the client's going to be using, and then the tax period and accounting method are pulling from the advanced account settings area. So I could go in and make edits to that from there if I needed to. And then once I start a tax review, we keep a timeline across the top of all the activity that a client performs and the accountant users perform. And so you'll see a timeline of anything that happens. So we know while I was in here, we were editing some expenses, right? So those show up, and these are links to the audit log to view the edits so you can trace back that history. And then down below, we'll see a list of the accounts, their ending balance from last year, their 2017 unadjusted balance and activity, and then any adjusting journal entries we've added or other transactions that have been added. So maybe somebody, went in when we started the review and they've added a check in, so they, made a change to a payment or something like that would show in the other transactions. We'd see the adjusted balance and then options to add notes for yourself or other team members at your firm, or attachments. So we can attach things to these accounts as well. Again, this is only going to be visible to the firm, and it's only going to be visible to the firm team members that have access to this client. So the clients aren't going to see it. If they've got another accountant invited into this account, they're not going to see it either. Now, the real beauty of this is if you are using ProConnect Tax Online, our Intuit cloud-based tax program, you can set up your tax mapping and actually push this right into viewing the tax return. So the tax mappings, it's going to make some educated guesses based on what it's seeing, and then if it doesn't know what something is, it's unmapped, and we can go through and assign the tax lines. And then we can look at what Intuit is assigned and see if QuickBooks has made the right judgment calls here, or we can edit the tax lines as well. And then when I click that View Tax Return, it's going to pop open. But before I do that, update the unadjusted balance. We've got options here to freeze the workspace, archive it to a zip, or finish my review. If I'm not using ProConnect Tax Online, I can export this into Excel. We saw that in the accounting reports as well, that, you know, in the reports area, that we can export the adjusted trial balance out. And, you know, most tax software has some way of doing mapping with an Excel file when you pull that information in. But this is pretty instantaneous. So if I click View Tax Return, I can create a new 2017 return or update something existing with new balances. And it brings me into ProConnect Tax Online in another window and guides me through that whole process. So I know we're right at the end here, so I'm not going to show all that much in here, but this is it, pulling in all that QBO data and showing you the tax return. And then you do your work from here to get everything ready the rest of the way and file. And like we saw before, I can actually see that status of the electronic filing within QBOA as well without having to come all the way back into this tool. So trying to get everything end to end all in one spot here. Okay, I'll stick around in case anybody has any last minute questions, but I hope that this was useful for you. If you want to put a message in here with some feedback, if you have any, I'd love to see what your thoughts are. And thank you so much for spending an hour with me today. I know it's a busy time of year and I really appreciate it. Take care, everybody.